All right, guys. So today's lesson is day 2 of completing the square. So yesterday was day 1, where we only saw specifically rational answers. Today we're going to look at what happens when we have irrationals. So basically, where we're going to end with just radicals. So for the first problem here, we've got x squared plus 8x equals 24. And if you remember, this is already in the form that we want because we now want the form specifically to look like x squared plus bx equals c. This is our new form that we are always looking for. So in this problem, we have that, so we're good to go. So at this point, it might be a good idea to get out the steps that you wrote in your notes yesterday to use those to kind of help you follow along. Obviously, I'm going to talk through them at each step I do, but it's not a bad idea to kind of follow along. So step 1 is you take your b value. So for us here, it's 8. And then step 2 is you want to divide that by 2. So when we divide that by 2, we're going to get 4. And then step 3 is to square that 4. So 4 squared becomes 16. At this point, we want to take the 16, what we just squared, and we want to add it to both sides of the equation, like so. So then when that happens, we end up with the following. So when we add 16 to both sides, we now have x squared plus 8x, that plus 16 that we just added on, and then we want to actually add the 16 and the 4, so it's going to equal 40. Okay, so that was step 4. Step 5 then is to factor. So if you remember, when we factor these, it's always going to be the form of your variable. Oops. Got a little bit of lag there. Sorry, guys. There we go. Your variable. It's going to be some integer here squared equals that 40. Okay, I don't know what's happening. I'm not sure why we're lagging. 40. Come on. Okay. It's frustrating. There we go. And the number that goes in the parentheses, remember, is always this number you get when you divide by 2. So it's going to be that plus 4. From here, we want to square root both sides. So we can cancel out that exponent of 2. So now we have x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 40. Now what we need to do at this point is we need to simplify that 40. So if you do your factor tree, so if I do a factor tree here of 40, we got 2 and 20, 2 and 10, 2 and 5. So basically you end up with the 2's there as a pair, and your 2 and 5 are left over. So if I rewrite this, oh, hold on. Give me a second, guys. Sorry, it just closed out of my software. So just hold on for a second. Instead of starting over, I'm just going to wait till it shows up. There we go. So we got rid of this, and then we ended up, so we were at the point where we just simplified that 40. So what we have is the x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. So we have those pair of 2's. So really we have x plus 4 equals plus or minus 2 square root of 2 times 5, which is 10. So now we need to solve. So once we square root, that was step 6. Step 7 now is just to solve. So what we want to do is we want to subtract 4 from both sides. And when we do that, we get x equals, now you have a few different options the way you can write this. One way you can write this is you can put the minus 4 and then plus or minus the 2 radical 10. This is the way I usually write it, and I usually stop here. But the other way you can think of it is two separate answers. You can say x is also negative 4 plus that 2 radical 10, and x is that negative 4 minus 2 radical 10, because it's the two separate equations. So you can also think of it like this as well. Either answer is acceptable. This is how I usually write it to make it a little simpler, because we cannot combine the negative 4 and the 2. That is a common mistake, is people will try to combine these right here. You can't do that. All right, they are not like terms. So that negative 4 doesn't have a square root, which means we cannot combine them. We just leave it. So this would be your answer, what I have right here. Okay? Let's do more examples. This is one of those things where the more examples you do, the better you get at it. So the next example we have is the following. Y squared minus 2y plus 5 equals 7. So the first thing you should notice right away here is we're not in the correct form. We need to get that plus 5 to the other side of the equation, so it is not on the the left side there. So we want to start by subtracting 5 from both sides. That way, our equation now looks like what we need it to be. Y squared minus 2y equals 2. So now we go through our steps. So step 1 is to take what our b value is, which is negative 2. Then we want to divide that by 2. And when we do that, we get a negative 1. And then last but not least, we want to square negative 1, which gives us a positive 1. So at this point, we want to take this positive 1 here, and we want to add it to both sides of our equation, so that we end up with y squared minus 2y plus 1 equals 3. Then we factor. So our factor becomes y some integer squared equals 3. And the integer we want to use is right here. So it's y minus 1 squared equals 3. Then we want to square root both sides. When we do that, I'm going to write it over here, we get y minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Square root of 3 can't be simplified, so that's as far as you can go. So now our last step is to add that 1 to both sides. So when we add the 1 to both sides, those cancel, so you're just left with y equals a positive 1 plus or minus the square root of 3. And there's our answer. Okay, I know this is different. We're not used to seeing an answer like this, where you have that 1 plus or minus square root of 3. We're used to getting like an actual number. But this is what happens when you start to deal with radicals. You can't combine things that aren't like terms, so you want to leave it like this. Okay, we're going to look at 2 more, because again, the more practice, the better. So here's the next one that we're going to look at. And if you want to, with this one, if you want to try this one on your own, you can go for it. You don't have to. But now that you've seen quite a few, you can maybe try this one at home by yourself. So this is the next example we're going to do. B squared minus 36b minus 24 equals 0. So at this point, if you want to pause the video, try it on your own, and then come back and check your answer, go for it. That might be a good idea, so you can see how well you're understanding. And then again, you can come watch me do it. Okay, hopefully you paused and tried this one on your own. So now you can check your work with me. So the first thing that you should have done is add that 24 to both sides. We don't want that there. So we wanted to add the 24 to both sides, so you end up with b squared minus 36b equals 24. Right, so that's where you want your equation to start, is like this right here. So then you want to go ahead and take your value, that would be your b. So for this problem, it's negative 36. We want to divide that by 2, so you end up with negative 18. And then you wanted to square that, square that negative 18 to get 324. So then we add the 324 to both sides of your equation. So what we end up with is b squared minus 36b plus 324 equals 348. Then we want to factor. So when we factor, we have b parentheses squared equals 348, and the number that goes in the parentheses is that negative 18. Okay, I'm going to erase this and continue because I'm running out of room. So at this point, we're going to want to square both sides. So here's where we're at. We've got b minus 18 squared equals 348. And again, we want to square root each side. So now we have b minus 18 here. We need to simplify 348. So that breaks down to 2 and 174. Oops. 174. That's another 2 and 87. And then that's a 3 and 29. So basically we have the prime factorization with a pair of 2's. So we're going to have plus or minus a 2 out front. Left hand side is the 3 times 29, which is 87. And then last but not least, we add 18 to both sides. So b equals 18 plus or minus 2 radical 87. And there's your answer. Okay, I got one more that I'm going to show you, and that is going to end this video for today. And then you have a worksheet that you'll be working on. But hopefully, again, as we're doing more of these, you're starting to get the hang of them. So as you follow along with your steps, and the more examples we do, usually the better it goes. So here is our last example that we're going to do together. So this example is x squared plus 4x equals a negative 48. So we start by taking our b, which is 4, and you want to divide that by 2. So when we divide 4 by 2, we get 2, and then we want to square it, which ends up being 4 again, because 2 squared is 4. Then we want to add 4 to both sides. So when we add that 4 to both sides, we get x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals a negative 44. Then we want to factor. So we have x, some integer squared equals negative 44. The integer that goes in there is this 2, so it's x plus 2 squared. Then we want to square root both sides. At this point, something should be dinging in your head, and that is this right here. We cannot take the square root of a negative. Remember, when we take the square root of a negative, we get what we call an imaginary solution. So as soon as you go to try to take a square root of negative like this, right away you can realize this is no real solution. And we would stop it there. All right, so that's all for this video. Hopefully this gives you good practice over more completing the square. I hope that from here you're starting to get a better idea, especially after the homeworks and stuff. And next time I see you, we'll go over that homework assignment to see how it went. Have a great rest of your day, guys.